She packed for the beach, kissed me goodbye, and sent selfies from the sand. I smiled, waved, and called the movers. When she came home, the closets were empty, her cards were dead, and the only thing I left her was a set of keys. No note, no warning, no mercy. My name is Owen Prescott. I'm 43 years old. I'm a corporate account manager for a regional telecom company out of Charlotte, North Carolina. I've got a decent salary, a house I bought with my own credit, and, until recently, a wife I thought was building something with me. Her name is Courtney. She's 38, sharp-looking, the kind of woman who walks into a room and adjusts the temperature without saying a word. We met at a company mixer 11 years ago. She worked in marketing for a healthcare firm downtown. We dated for 2 years, got married on a Saturday in October, and for a good while, it felt like we had the blueprint figured out. I'm writing this down because someone told me I should. Ray, my buddy of 15 years, said, "Owen, if you don't get this out of your head, it's going to eat you alive." So here I am, getting it out. What I know now is that the version of Courtney I married wasn't the version I'd been living with for the past 2 years. The woman I married used to leave me notes on the bathroom mirror, used to call me at lunch just to hear my voice, used to sit on the back porch with me after dinner and actually talk, not about bills or schedules or what needed fixing around the house, but about life, plans, dreams, the kind of conversation that reminds you why you chose someone. That woman disappeared gradually. First came the distance, small, easy to explain away. Long days at work, stress, fatigue. Then came the phone, always face down, always nearby, always a reason to step out of the room when it buzzed. Then came the girls' nights. Once a month became twice. Twice became every other weekend. And somewhere in there, my wife stopped being a partner and started being a roommate who occasionally remembered to ask how my day went. I tried. I want to be clear about that. I suggested counseling twice. She brushed it off both times, once calling it a little dramatic, and the second time, saying she wasn't the type to air her problems to a stranger. I planned a weekend away for our 9th anniversary. She canceled 2 days before, said work had something urgent. I made dinners. I showed up. I kept the lights on in a house that was getting darker by the month. The night before everything shifted, I was sitting in the living room at close to midnight. Courtney was asleep. I wasn't. I hadn't been sleeping well for months, but that particular night, something felt different. Off. Like that low-level hum you hear before a storm that you can't quite place, but your body already knows. I picked up my phone and opened the Find My app. We'd shared locations since the early days. Practical, she'd said, in case one of us ever broke down on the highway. Heard I was right there. Home. Asleep. Everything normal on paper. But nothing felt normal. I thought back to 3 weeks earlier. I'd been helping Courtney haul some old boxes out of the hall closet when a small envelope fell from between 2 stacked bins. Inside was a hotel key card sleeve, the kind with the room number written in pen. The date stamped on the sleeve was a Tuesday night. A Tuesday, she'd said. She was working late for a department review. I put it back. I told myself it was old. Maybe from a conference. Maybe nothing. But when you start telling yourself, maybe nothing, about things that feel like something, you already know the truth. You're just not ready to pick it up yet. I was almost ready. 1 week after that night on the couch, I made a phone call. Not to Courtney. Not to a friend. I called a number Ray had given me months back with a look on his face that said he hoped I'd never need it. Lou Decker, private investigator, retired Charlotte PD, 22 years on the force, and another 14 doing what he called cleaning up the messes people leave when they think nobody's watching. I left him a voicemail that Tuesday morning. He called back inside of an hour. I didn't know it yet, but that phone call was the first real step toward the day Courtney would come home to an empty house, keys on the counter, and silence where I used to be. She never saw it coming. I made sure of that. Lou Decker showed up to our second meeting, carrying a brown, expandable folder the size of a small briefcase. He set it on the table between us without ceremony, the way a contractor drops a quote sheet. Here are the facts. Here's what they cost. We met at a coffee shop off South Boulevard, a place I'd chosen specifically because none of Courtney's friends ever came near it. Lou was already in the corner booth when I arrived, nursing black coffee and wearing the same kind of expression I imagined he'd worn while questioning suspects for 2 decades. Calm, patient, like he had all the time in the world and none of it to waste. 10 days, he said, sliding the folder toward me. Everything's in there. I opened it slowly. The first page was a summary sheet. Dates, times, locations. 12 entries over 10 days. My eyes moved down the list, and my jaw tightened with each line. Tuesday lunch, a restaurant in South End I'd never heard of. Thursday evening, a hotel off I-77. Saturday afternoon, the same hotel, different room. The name on the reservation both times, Colin Ware. I knew that name. Colin Ware had been a project lead at a firm that partnered with Courtney's company on a joint campaign about 3 years back. I met him once, briefly, at a work function she'd brought me to. Tall, easy smile, the kind of guy who fills up a room without saying anything particularly interesting. I'd shaken his hand. He'd called me man instead of my name. I kept reading. Behind the summary sheet were photographs. I won't go into detail, but they were clear and they were enough. Courtney and Colin outside the hotel. Courtney and Colin at a restaurant table, her hand on his forearm, both of them laughing. And one more, the one that landed heaviest. The two of them standing beside a silver SUV in a parking garage, her leaning into him in a way she hadn't leaned into me in longer than I cared to admit. Then Lou turned to the next section, and that's when the story got wider. There's more, he said, tapping the page with one finger. She didn't go alone. The photographs in that section showed Courtney arriving at a beach resort in Hilton Head. This was from a trip 3 months prior, one she described as just the girls. We needed it. Standing beside her were two women I recognized immediately. Tessa, her closest friend since college, and Carrie, her older sister. And standing within comfortable, obvious proximity to each of them were 3 men. Colin was one. The other 2 I didn't know by name yet, but Lou had that covered. The friend, Tessa, she's been seeing a man named Drew Halford for about 8 months, Lou noted, reading from his pad. Her husband Craig knows. Or suspects. Depends on the day. Word is he's been running his own side arrangement, so neither one is pushing the other too hard. He paused. Convenient. And the sister? I asked. Lou's expression shifted. Not quite a smirk, but close. Carrie's guy is named Pete Garland. Been in the picture about 5 months. Her husband, Doug, doesn't seem particularly motivated to address it. He doesn't work. She earns. My read is he's not going to rock the boat that feeds him. I sat back and let that settle. 3 women. 3 men who weren't their husbands. One tidy little arrangement where everyone covered for everyone else because nobody could afford the truth coming out. Courtney hadn't gone rogue on her own. She'd built herself a safety net. They used each other as alibis, Lou said, closing his folder. Cross-checked their stories. Coordinated the same weekends. Whoever got questioned by a husband could point to the others as witnesses. He picked up his coffee. Oldest trick in the book. Works until it doesn't. I asked him how solid the evidence was. Solid enough that no lawyer is going to argue it away, he replied. What you do with it is your call. I drove home that evening on autopilot, the folder locked in my trunk. Courtney was in the kitchen when I walked in, stirring something on the stove, humming low. She looked up and smiled, the easy, unguarded kind, and asked how my day was. Long, I told her, but productive. She nodded and turned back to the stove. I set my keys on the counter, walked to the back porch, and stood there in the cooling air looking at the yard I'd spent 2 summers landscaping. The garden bed along the fence. The patio I'd laid myself with help from Ray one hot July weekend. All of it built with my hands, my time, my belief that I was building something that mattered. I wasn't angry. I'd moved past that somewhere between the parking garage photo and Lou's flat recitation of facts. What I felt was clarity, clean and sharp as a level line. I pulled out my phone and texted Ray. Need to talk. Not urgent, but soon. He replied in under a minute. Name the time. Then I went inside, sat across from my wife at the dinner table, and listened to her talk about her upcoming trip. Hilton Head again, she said. The girls needed a reset. Tessa had already booked the rental. Carrie was in. I said it sounded like fun, and I meant none of it. Ray lives 20 minutes from me in a split-level off Lawyers Road that he's owned since his divorce 8 years ago. He keeps a gas grill on the back deck, a spare case of beer in the garage fridge, and an opinion on everything, whether you ask for it or not. That's what makes him worth listening to. He doesn't soften things to spare your feelings. He just tells you what he sees. I got there on a Thursday evening. He had the grill going already, 2 steaks on the rack, and handed me a beer before I'd even cleared the screen door. You look like a man who's been holding something for too long, he said, turning the stakes. I have been. I sat down in one of the deck chairs and set the folder on the table between us. He glanced at it, then at me. He didn't reach for it. He waited. So I laid it out. All of it. Lou's report, the photographs, the hotel receipts, the coordinated alibi system between Courtney, Tessa, and Carrie. By the time I finished, Ray had set down his tongs and was staring at the middle distance with the expression of a man who had suspected something for years but never wanted to be right. Colin Ware, he repeated. The one from that function. The one who called you man. That's the one. He shook his head slowly. How long? Lou estimates at least 8 months. Could be longer. Ray was quiet for a moment. Then he reached for his beer, took a long pull, and set it down with the deliberate calm of someone who'd made a decision. What are you going to do? I'm going to handle it, I told him. Quietly. Completely. I'm not interested in a scene. He nodded like that was the only acceptable answer. What I hadn't told Ray yet was that 2 days earlier, I'd had a different conversation. A harder one. I tracked down Craig, Tessa's husband, through a mutual contact and suggested coffee. He agreed, which told me he already knew something was wrong. We met at a Panera near his office. Craig is 44, works in pharmaceutical sales, keeps himself in shape, and carries the practiced ease of a man who's used to talking his way through situations. He was friendly enough when I sat down, but when I put Lou's summary sheet on the table, not the photos, just the timeline, his friendliness shifted into something quieter. He studied the page for a long moment. I figured, he said finally, and I pressed. He exhaled and leaned back. There was a pause that told me everything before he spoke. Look, Owen, my situation is complicated. Tessa and I have our own things going on. He stopped, chose his next words carefully. I'm not exactly in a position to throw stones. So that was that. Craig wasn't going to fight. He wasn't going to stand up. He was going to fold his hand and call it complicated. The conversation with Doug, Carrie's husband, was even shorter. I reached him by phone. He listened to what I said, asked one question about whether any of this would have to go public, and when I told him that was up to him, he went quiet for nearly 30 seconds. I appreciate you telling me, he said at last. But Carrie and we were through things privately. I knew what that meant. Doug worked through things privately because the alternative involved losing access to a lifestyle he hadn't earned. He wasn't going to bite the hand. 2 men, 2 different reasons, same result. Neither of them was going to do a thing. I told Ray all of this over the stakes. He listened without interrupting, which for Ray was its own kind of statement. So it's just you, he said. Just me, I confirmed. He raised his beer in a brief, dry toast. Then let's make sure you do it right. That was also the week I noticed Sean Doyle. Sean is a senior account manager at my firm, 44, slick in a way that reads as competent until you've worked with him long enough to see the seams. We'd always been cordial. Not close, but functional. The kind of office relationship built on mutual professional respect and nothing deeper. But after Lou's report, I started paying different attention to things around me. And what I noticed about Sean was that he'd started asking questions he had no real reason to ask. How was Courtney doing? Have we done anything fun lately? Once, standing at the coffee station, he mentioned offhandedly that he and his wife had run into some people from Courtney's office at a restaurant a few weeks back. He said it casually, too casually. I filed it away and said nothing. 2 days later, I checked our company's shared project portal and found that Sean had accessed a client contract I was managing, one that had no overlap with his accounts. When I asked him about it directly, he gave me a clean, reasonable excuse. But his eyes moved just slightly to the left before he answered. That leftward glance. Lou had mentioned it in passing once. People look left when they're constructing something, he'd said, right when they're remembering. Sean was constructing. I didn't tip my hand. I just made a note. And I started keeping Sean Doyle at a careful, deliberate arm's length, in conversations, in meetings, and especially in anything that touched my personal life. The next morning, I called my attorney, a woman named Patricia Gibbs who'd handled my uncle's estate and came with a reputation for being equal parts sharp and unmovable. I told her I needed a consultation. Divorce, asset protection, real estate. She had an opening the following Tuesday. I told her I'd be there. The trip was scheduled for a Thursday. Courtney had been talking about it for 2 weeks. Hilton Head, for days, the girls needed sun and salt air, and time away from everything. She said it the way people say things they've rehearsed. Easy. Practiced. No detail out of place. I helped her carry her suitcase to the car. I kissed her cheek at the door. She laughed and said, "Don't just work the whole time I'm gone." "I won't," I told her. She drove away. I stood on the front step and watched until her taillights disappeared around the corner. Then I went inside, poured a cup of coffee, and sat at the kitchen table for exactly 12 minutes. After that, I made a phone call. The movers arrived at 2 in the afternoon, a 2-man crew I'd booked under my name, paid in advance, told to expect a 4-hour job. They were professional, efficient, and quiet, which was exactly what I'd asked for. I walked them through the house once and pointed out what was mine. My clothes, my tools in the garage, the bookshelf in the office I'd built from raw lumber the first winter we lived here, my grandfather's armchair from the den, Rex, our 3-year-old beagle, who watched the whole operation from the couch with one ear raised, and then followed me to the truck like he'd been packed too. I left Courtney's things exactly as they were. Her candles, her closet, her skincare shelf lined up like a little pharmacy. I left the dishes and the furniture we'd bought together, and the framed prints she'd chosen for the hallway. I left the wedding photo on the bedroom dresser, face up, undisturbed. I left my keys on the kitchen counter. No note. I was halfway through the second load when my phone buzzed. Video call. Courtney's name on the screen. I leaned against the doorframe of the nearly empty living room, took one breath, and answered. Her face appeared, sunbright, laughing about something off-screen. Behind her was blue water and white sand. She turned the camera briefly. There was Tessa, there was Carrie, all 3 of them in the kind of easy joy that comes when you're exactly where you wanted to be. "Hey, babe," she said, grinning. "Look where we are." "Beautiful," I said, and I smiled, genuine enough that she had no reason to look twice. "You okay? You look tired." "Long day at the office," I told her. "But good. Really good, actually." She laughed again at something one of the others said, waved at me, and wrapped up the call in under 2 minutes. Same way she always ended calls lately, efficiently, like checking a box. I tapped end, slipped the phone into my pocket, and looked around at what remained of the house we'd shared for 7 years. The movers were carrying out the last boxes. I said quietly to no one in particular, "You have absolutely no idea what's coming home to you." Rex looked up at me from the floor. We were out by 6:30. The rental was a clean 2-bedroom unit on the east side of Charlotte. 3rd floor, good light, a small balcony that faced east. Nothing fancy, but solid. Mine. I'd signed the lease 10 days ago under the radar, paid the deposit from a personal account Courtney had no access to. Patricia Gibbs had already filed the preliminary paperwork that morning. The joint account had been separated. The shared credit card was closed. When I set Rex's water bowl on the kitchen floor of the new place, and he lapped from it without a second glance, I felt something settle in my chest that had been loose for a long time. Courtney would land on Sunday evening. She'd take a cab or have Tessa drop her. She'd walk through the front door expecting the house she'd left. What she'd find instead was silence, empty closets, and a set of keys on the counter. No note, because there was nothing left to say. Sunday came in quiet. I spent the morning at the new apartment unpacking the last 2 boxes, mostly books, a few framed photos I'd kept, and the small wooden clock that used to sit on my father's workbench until he gave it to me the year I graduated college. I set it on the kitchen shelf, wound it once, and listened to it tick. Steady, reliable, the kind of thing that doesn't care what's falling apart around it. Rex was already at home. He'd claimed the couch the first night, and I'd let him. Some battles aren't worth fighting. Ray came by around noon with sandwiches and 2 cups of coffee from the place down the street. We ate on the balcony without talking much. That's the thing about long friendships. Sometimes the silence does more than the conversation. "She lands tonight?" he asked eventually. "Around 7. He nodded, took a bite, looked out at the street below. "You ready for whatever comes next?" "I've been ready since I opened Lou's folder." He didn't push further. "That's Ray." Courtney's flight touched down at 7:12 according to the airline app I'd quietly checked. I'd stopped tracking her location days ago, deleted the shared access, changed my own settings. I didn't need to watch her move through the world anymore. What happened next would come to me on its own. It came at 7:49. My phone lit up on the kitchen counter. Courtney's name. I looked at it, let it ring through, and set it back down. She called again at 7:53. Then 8:01. Then 3 more times before 8:15, each one a little shorter on patience. I could tell by the frequency, the way the call started coming faster, the gaps between them shrinking like she was working herself up to something. By call 9, I moved my phone to the bedroom nightstand and went back to the living room to read. The voicemail started around the 8th call. I didn't listen to them. I already knew the shape of what they contained. Confusion first, then frustration, then something sharper underneath. Courtney was not a woman who handled uncertainty well. She liked to control the frame of every conversation, to arrive prepared and leave having managed the outcome. Walking into an empty house with no explanation had stripped her of every tool she relied on. I thought about that and felt nothing resembling guilt. Call 17 came just after 9:30. I know the count because I've been keeping it without meaning to, the way you keep score at something you didn't plan to watch. After that one, the call stopped. A few minutes later, a text appeared. Owen, what's going on? Call me. Then, 10 minutes after that, this isn't funny. Where is Rex? That one almost made me smile. Not because it was amusing, but because the dog landed higher on her list of concerns than I might have expected. Or maybe I was the second loss she hadn't gotten to yet. More texts followed over the next hour. I read them without responding. The early ones were controlled, demanding, clipped, the voice of a woman who expected an answer because she was used to getting one. Then they started to shift. By the 5th message, the tone had changed, not softer but rawer. Less management, more reaction. The one that told me everything I needed to know arrived at 10:47. Is this about Colin? Not. What are you talking about? Not. Who is Colin? Just that. 3 words that confirmed she'd already done the math and arrived at the only answer available to her. I set the phone down, face up, and looked at the ceiling. She hadn't even tried to construct an alternate explanation. The lie reflex that had run so smoothly for months had just stopped, because there was nowhere left for it to go. I didn't respond that night. I turned off the ringer, made sure Rex was settled, and went to bed at 11. Slept better than I had in months, which told me more about the weight I'd been carrying than I'd admitted to myself. Monday morning brought a different kind of message. Not frantic, surgical. I need you to call me so we can handle this like adults. Running away solves nothing. Running away. That reframe was quick. Already she was rewriting the story, turning my deliberate, planned exit into something impulsive, something reactive. If I'd run away, then she was the stable one. If I'd panicked, then she was the reasonable one waiting to talk it through. I forwarded the message to Patricia Gibbs with a 1-line note. She's beginning to construct a narrative. Just keeping you in the loop. Patricia replied within the hour. Noted. Say nothing. Let her keep talking. That was exactly my plan. By Tuesday, Courtney had moved from text to a voicemail that lasted 4 minutes. I listened to 40 seconds of it, enough to hear the shift from rehearsed calm into something that sounded like genuine disorientation. She wasn't used to silence as a response. In 11 years of marriage, I'd always engaged, always tried to explain, to reason, to fix. The fact that I was simply not there, not angry, not fighting, just absent, seemed to unsettle her more than any argument could have. Ray called Tuesday evening to check in. Heard anything from Craig or Doug? He asked. Nothing. Radio silence from both of them. Figures. He was quiet for a moment. What about that guy at work, Doyle? Still watching him, I said. He asked my assistant yesterday if I'd taken time off recently. Phrased it casually. She didn't think anything of it. But you did. I did. Ray exhaled. He's feeding information to someone, either to Colin or to Courtney directly. That's my read, I agreed. I'm not moving on it yet, but I will. There's a particular kind of patience that comes from knowing you hold all the cards. It's not arrogance. It's just the quiet confidence of a man who did his homework before the test started. Courtney was scrambling. Sean was positioning. And I was standing completely still, waiting for each of them to show me exactly where they planned to move next. When you stop reacting and start watching, people reveal everything. She showed up at my office on Wednesday. I saw her first, through the glass partition that separated the lobby from the main floor. She was standing at the reception desk in a charcoal blazer I recognized, hair down, posture too straight. The kind of rigid composure that comes not from confidence, but from holding yourself together through sheer force of will. My assistant Marlene buzzed me. There's a woman here who says she's your wife. She doesn't have an appointment. Tell her I'll be out in 5 minutes, I said. Then I finished the email I was writing, sent it, straightened my desk, and walked out. Courtney turned when she heard my footsteps. For just a fraction of a second, before the composure reassembled itself, I saw relief on her face. Like she'd been afraid I wouldn't come out at all. Can we talk somewhere private? She asked. I gestured toward the small conference room off the lobby. She went in first. I closed the door behind us and stayed standing near it. I didn't offer her a seat. She set her bag on the table and looked at me like she was trying to read a document in a language she used to speak fluently. You didn't call, she said. No, I agreed. Owen. Her voice had the careful steadiness of someone rehearsing each word. I understand you're upset. I understand something happened and you needed space. But disappearing, taking the dog, clearing out your things, that's not how two people who have 11 years together handle a problem. I'll let that sit for a moment. You're right, I said. That's not how two people who have 11 years together handle a problem. But that's also not what this is. Her jaw tightened slightly. What does that mean? It means I'm not upset, Courtney. I'm not having a reaction. I'm not going to calm down and come home and pretend the last 8 months didn't happen. I kept my voice level and even. I know about Collinware. I know about the hotel off I-77. I know about Hilton Head, the real version of it, not the one you told me. I know about Tessa and Craig's arrangement, and I know about Carrie and Doug's. The color shifted in her face. Not dramatically. Courtney was too controlled for dramatic, but it shifted. You had me followed, she said finally. I had the facts confirmed, I replied. There's a difference. She pulled out a chair and sat, which told me the standing had become too much effort. She was quiet for a long moment, looking at the table's surface. Then she looked up. I wasn't happy, she said quietly. I know that's not an excuse, but I need you to understand that what happened wasn't. It wasn't nothing to me. I was drowning and you weren't seeing it. I studied her face, not with anger, with curiosity, almost. The way you look at something you once valued and are trying to understand how you overestimated it. I saw it. I told her. I asked you twice about counseling. I planned a weekend away you canceled. I made dinners you criticized. I was there, Courtney. You just stopped wanting me to be. I paused. That's not drowning. That's choosing. Her eyes went glassy. So that's it. 11 years, and you're just done. I was done the moment you decided I wasn't worth the truth. I moved toward the door and opened it. You'll be hearing from my attorney. Her name is Patricia Gibbs. She's thorough, so I'd suggest getting representation quickly. Courtney stood. Owen, I'm not angry, I said from the doorway, clearly enough for the lobby to hear, if anyone was listening. I genuinely hope you figure out what you're looking for, but you're going to have to look for it somewhere else. I walked back to my office, closed the door, and sat down. Through the glass, I watched her stand in the lobby for a moment, bag over her shoulder, the composure finally slipping just enough to show the edges of something underneath. Then she walked out. Marlene knocked twice and leaned in. Everything okay? Everything's fine, I said. Can you give me the Henderson file? I've got to call it too. She nodded and left. I turned to my monitor and got back to work. Sean Doyle made his move on a Friday. I've been waiting for it. Patient the way you're patient when you already know the ending. Not tense, just ready. He'd been circling for 2 weeks, asking questions that had no professional reason to be asked, positioning himself near conversations he had no business being near. I'd watched him the way Lou Decker had taught me to watch things, without reaction, without tipping the hand, just steady accumulation of observation. The move came during our weekly account review meeting. 8 people around a conference table, and Sean waited until the last 5 minutes, when everyone was half checked out and reaching for their phones, to drop it. By the way, he said, casual as a man commenting on the weather, I ran into Colin. We're at the Ballantine Corporate Park last week. He mentioned he's been having a tough time lately. Personal stuff. He glanced at me with the practiced neutrality of a man who'd rehearsed the look. Didn't know you two were connected. The table went quiet in the way tables do when something has been said that everyone can feel, but nobody wants to name. I set down my pen slowly, looked at Sean with the same, even expression I'd used reviewing a quarterly report. I appreciate you sharing that, I said, though I'm not sure what it has to do with the Henderson account. He smiled. Finn, just making conversation. Let's save the conversation for after we close the quarter, I replied. Thanks, everyone. The meeting ended. People filed out. Sean was one of the first to leave, which told me the move hadn't landed the way he'd planned. He'd wanted a reaction, confusion, discomfort, something he could carry back to whoever was asking him to gather information. Instead, he'd gotten nothing, and nothing is the hardest response to work with. I let 20 minutes pass. Then I walked to his office and closed the door behind me. Sean looked up from his screen with the careful expression of a man recalibrating. I sat down across from him without being invited. "How long have you known Colin Ware?" I asked. A pause. "We've crossed paths at a few industry events. Nothing significant. Has Courtney ever been at those events?" The pause this time was a half-second longer. "I don't. I may have seen her once or twice." "Owen, what is this about?" "This is about the fact that you accessed the Dorchester contract 2 weeks ago," I said. "You have no accounts that touch that file." I checked the access log myself. I kept my voice completely flat. "You've also asked my assistant twice in the past 10 days about my schedule and whether I'd taken personal time. And this morning you dropped Colin Ware's name in a room full of colleagues." Sean opened his mouth. I raised one hand, not dramatically, just enough to stop him. "I'm not here to argue about it. I'm here to tell you clearly that I know what you've been doing, I know who you've been doing it for, and I'm giving you exactly one opportunity to stop." I leaned forward slightly. "The access logs are already documented. HR has a copy. If you want to make this a formal process, I'm prepared for that. If you'd prefer to go back to doing your actual job, that works too." He stared at me for a long moment. The recalibration was visible. You could almost see him cycling through the available responses and finding none of them adequate. "I hear you," he said finally. Quiet. Flat. "Good." I stood. "Close the quarter strong, Sean. That's what I need from you." I walked out without looking back. That afternoon I called Lou Decker for the last time in a professional capacity. I told him about Sean, about the meeting, about the conversation. He listened, asked 2 questions, and then said something I hadn't expected. "Ware's been asking around about you," Lou said. "Through a third party, not directly. Wanted to know if you'd retained an attorney, whether there were legal filings in process." "What did the third party tell him?" "Nothing useful. But the fact that he's asking means he knows the situation is further along than Courtney's told him." Lou paused. "He may think he's got some exposure here. Reputational, maybe professional. Let him think it," I said. Lou made a sound that might have been a laugh. "You're handling this well. Most people in your position are a mess by now. Most people didn't have 10 days to prepare." He laughed properly that time. We wrapped up the call, and that was that. Lou Decker, retired Charlotte PD, 14 years cleaning up other people's messes, had done his part. The rest was mine. Ray came over that evening. We sat on the balcony the way we had been doing most evenings lately. 2 men, a comfortable silence, the city doing its thing below. "Doyle's neutralized?" he asked. "For now. He knows I have the documentation." "And where?" "He's nervous," I said. "Which is about right." Ray nodded. "Patricia's still moving on the house sale. Listing closes next week. 2 offers already, both above ask." He leaned back in his chair and looked at the skyline. "You know what I keep thinking about?" "What?" "The fact that she was laughing on that beach while you were loading boxes." He shook his head slowly. "Sending selfies." "She was," I confirmed. "And now she's got nothing to laugh about." I didn't answer that. I just picked up my coffee and let the night settle around us the way it had been doing lately, without weight, without noise, without the low-grade tension that had lived in my chest for the better part of 2 years. Rex put his head on my knee. I scratched behind his ear. The clock on the kitchen shelf ticked on. Patricia Gibbs did not lose. That was the word around the Charlotte legal community. Not that she was aggressive. Not that she was sharp, though she was both. The word was that she did not lose. She prepared with the thoroughness of a surgeon and argued with the patience of a woman who had seen every play run against her and written notes on all of them. She called me on a Monday morning with a particular briskness that meant something had moved. "Opposing counsel sent over preliminary terms," she said. "You're going to want to sit down." I was already sitting. "Go ahead." Courtney's attorney, a man named Howard Blaine who specialized in high-conflict divorce, had submitted a position document that managed to be both predictable and audacious. She was seeking the house outright, primary possession on the basis of 11 years of occupancy and emotional attachment. She was seeking the newer of the 2 vehicles. She was requesting a share of my pension contributions made during the marriage, and she had characterized my departure as abandonment. a term with specific legal implications in North Carolina that her attorney was clearly hoping would complicate my position. Abandonment, I repeated. It's a reach, Patricia said, but it's a calculated one. Howard Blaine knows it won't stick with what we have on record, but he's hoping the word puts you on the defensive, changes your posture in negotiation. It doesn't. I know, she said. I could hear the slight approval in her voice. Here's where we stand. The house is in your name, purchased 16 months before the marriage. Her claim of occupational attachment is a thin argument in this jurisdiction. The vehicle she's requesting, I've already pulled the purchase records. You financed it solely. That's documented. She paused. The pension is the only point with any genuine complexity. But even there, we have a strong position. And the abandonment claim? I'm filing a counter-response this week that will include the full documentation from Lou Decker's report. Timeline, locations, corroborating evidence. She paused. That documentation doesn't just neutralize the abandonment claim. It establishes the factual context for your departure. Entirely. I let that sit for a moment. What's our realistic timeline? If she's reasonable, 4 to 5 months. If Howard Blaine decides to draw it out longer. But I want to show you something interesting. I heard paper moving on her end. Courtney's situation has changed since she filed. I have it on good authority that Colin has gone quiet. The relationship appears to have ended abruptly, possibly because someone in his professional circle became aware of certain details. I hadn't orchestrated that, but I wasn't surprised by it either. Lou had said we was nervous. Nervous men protect themselves first. How does that affect things? I asked. It may make her more motivated to settle, Patricia replied. A woman fighting a divorce while her reason for it has evaporated is a woman in a difficult emotional position. Difficult emotional positions tend to make for faster agreements. We talked for another 20 minutes about specifics, asset division, what I was willing to negotiate on, and what I wasn't, the timeline for the house sale. By the end of the call, I felt the way I always felt after talking to Patricia Gibbs, like someone had put the furniture back in the right places. No children. That was the one thing Courtney's attorney had no card to play on. No custody arrangement to complicate. No child support to weaponize. No third party whose well-being could be leveraged against either side. Courtney had floated the idea of starting a family twice in the past 3 years, and both times I've been the one who said, let's wait until things feel more settled between us. I hadn't known why I said it then. I understood why now. The absence of children meant the divorce was, at its core, a financial and legal matter. And on financial and legal matters, I was better prepared than she'd expected. 2 days after my call with Patricia, Courtney's sister Carrie called me. I almost didn't pick up, but something made me. Her voice was different from what I'd expected. Quieter, stripped of the social performance that usually coded it. I just wanted to say I'm sorry, she said, for my part in it, for covering for her. I was quiet for a moment. I appreciate that, Carrie. She's not doing well, Carrie added. I'm not telling you that to make you feel bad. I thought you should know what kind of damage this does. When it all falls apart. I know what kind of damage it does, I said. I've been living it. She didn't respond to that. We ended the call shortly after, and I sat with it for a while. Not softened by it. Not unmoved by it either. Just clear. The damage had been done long before I packed a single box. All I'd done was stop standing in it. The house sold in 9 days. 2 offers, both above asking. Patricia recommended the stronger one, a clean, pre-approved buyer with no contingencies, and I accepted it on a Wednesday morning without ceremony. I signed the paperwork in Patricia's conference room, took a copy from my files, and drove back to the apartment, feeling the way you feel after setting down something heavy you'd been carrying so long you forgot it'd weight. Courtney found out through Howard Blaine's office that same afternoon. Patricia told me Blaine had called twice, first with objections, then with a request for an emergency mediation session. Patricia declined the emergency framing and offered a standard scheduling timeline instead. The objections went nowhere. The house was mine. The sale was legal, properly executed, and entirely within my rights. Howard Blaine was a competent attorney running a weak hand, and he knew it. What he didn't know, what I hadn't fully anticipated, was what happened to Colin that same week. Lou Decker called me on Thursday. Brief, factual, the way Lou did everything. Word's been let go, he said. His firm, Apparently, a client flagged some conduct issues, professional boundary violations. HR opened an investigation. He resigned before they could formalize it. I sat with that for a moment. Was that connected to any of this? Indirectly, Lou said. Word travels in business circles, Owen, especially when someone's been careless long enough. A pause. He's also no longer in contact with Courtney, from what I can tell. That ended about 10 days ago. So the affair was over. The house was sold. The legal process was moving forward on Patricia's timeline. And Courtney, the woman who had spent 8 months constructing an elaborate parallel life, was now standing in the middle of it, while all 3 walls came down at once. I didn't feel triumphant. I want to be honest about that. What I felt was something quieter, the particular stillness that comes when justice moves at its own pace without you having to push it. 2 days later, Carrie called again. This time she wasn't apologizing. She was relaying information, carefully, the way a person does when they're not sure how it will land. She's not doing well, Carrie said. I mean, really not doing well. She filed for the mediation, but I don't think her heart's in the fight anymore. Colin's gone. The job situation is, there's talk that the fallout from his firm touched Courtney's professional reputation too. Some of the same clients. She stopped. I'm not telling you this because I want you to feel bad. I know, I said. I just think she finally understands what she threw away. Not because she lost you specifically, because she lost the life, the stability, the person who actually showed up. I didn't respond to that directly. What was there to say? That I'd shown up for years while she looked elsewhere? She already knew that. So did Carrie. I hope she rebuilds, I said finally. I genuinely do. Just not anywhere near me. Carrie was quiet. Fair enough, she said softly. The mediation happened 3 weeks later. A single session, 4 hours, in a downtown Charlotte conference room, with both attorneys present and Courtney, and I sitting at opposite ends of a long table. She looked tired, not broken. Courtney was too composed for broken, but the particular kind of tired that comes from fighting a battle where the outcome was already written. Howard Blaine presented 3 revised positions. Patricia countered all 3 with documentation that made each one untenable. By hour 3, Courtney's attorney was recommending she accept the framework Patricia had proposed 2 weeks prior. Courtney looked at me once across the table, just once directly for about 3 seconds. I held her gaze without expression. She looked away first. The agreement was signed that afternoon. She kept her car and a fair division of the joint savings. She received a one-time settlement figure that Patricia had agreed to as a clean exit consideration. No alimony. No ongoing entanglement. The house proceeds went entirely to me. Rex sat on the balcony with me that evening while the city settled into its nighttime noise. Ray texted, "Done?" I typed back, "Done." His reply came immediately. "Good man. Dinner Friday." I set the phone down and scratched Rex behind the ears. Done. Completely, legally, finally done. For months later, I was living in a different city. The telecom company had offered me a regional director position covering 3 mid-Atlantic states, a role I'd been passed over for twice during the years I'd spent managing a life that didn't value me. When it came up again, I took the call seriously this time. Flew to D.C. for 2 days of conversations, liked what I heard, and accepted the offer 3 weeks after the divorce was finalized. Charlotte had been my city for 11 years. Some of it was genuinely good. I didn't burn those memories. I just didn't need to carry them anymore. I found an apartment in Arlington with a view I hadn't expected to care about, and ended up caring about considerably. Good light in the mornings. A park 2 blocks away where Rex had quickly made himself known to every other dog owner in a 4-block radius. A coffee shop on the corner where the owner remembered your order by the 3rd visit. A clean life. An honest one. Ray came up for a long weekend in October. We walked along the Potomac on a Saturday afternoon, the kind of fall day that makes you remember why seasons exist. He was quieter than usual, which for Ray meant something was working through him. "You good?" he asked eventually. "Yeah," I said, and I meant it in a way I hadn't meant it in years. "No part of you." He stopped. Started again. No looking back. I thought about that honestly before answering. About Courtney on the beach, sending selfies while I loaded boxes. About the hotel receipt folded in her old purse. About the long dinner table silences and the eye rolls and the gradual erosion of a man who kept trying to hold something together that had already let go. "No," I said. "That part of my life taught me something I needed to learn." but I don't owe it anything else. Ray nodded. He picked up a flat stone near the path and turned it over in his hand. She reached out to me, he said. Last month. Asked how you were. What did you tell her? That you were doing fine. He tossed the stone toward the water. Because you are. We walked the rest of the path without talking much. Rex trotted ahead, nose down, completely unbothered by the past. That evening I sat at my kitchen table and opened the journal I'd started the week I moved out. I've been writing in it most nights. Not about Courtney, not about the divorce. About the work, the new city, the things I wanted to build now that I was building for myself. I read back through a few entries and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time sitting in that Charlotte house. Like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Not because everything had worked out perfectly. Not because the year hadn't cost me something real. But because I'd finally stopped letting someone else's choices define the size of my life. I closed the journal, made coffee, watched the city go dark outside the window. Rex settled at my feet. The clock on the shelf ticked on.